that if BRICS was allowed to mature to the extent had developed strong secretariats, enlarged the new development bank into a functioning lending institution. They were able to settle most of their trade and investment without using the dollar, which is on the way of them so doing. Then, in a few years' time, to form their own BRICS currency, then that would leave America as another failed empire. A primary objective of Washington, whoever is in the White House, is to see that BRICS fails. What does this mean? First of all, BRICS are not going to disappear.
The United States has long been accustomed to its dominant global position. Still, it is increasingly facing a reality where its influence is no longer as unquestioned as it once was. After World War II and the collapse of the Soviet Union, the U.S. enjoyed unparalleled power, but today, the geopolitical landscape is much more complex. Many nations once devastated by war have regained their strength, and emerging global powers are challenging the old order. This shift is evident in events like the BRICS-plus summit in Kazan, Russia, where leaders from 36 countries met to discuss critical issues like the Russia-Ukraine conflict and reducing reliance on the US dollar. The summit highlighted that Russia, often portrayed as isolated by the US, is, in fact, playing a major role in reshaping global alliances. The Kazan Declaration, supported by all 9 BRICS members, further solidified this emerging multipolar world. According to Simon Hunt, CEO of Simon Hunt Strategic Services, the U.S. is increasingly aware that the BRICS alliance represents a growing threat to its economic supremacy, particularly regarding the U.S. dollar's dominant role in global trade. If BRICS successfully establishes robust institutions, like the new development bank, and begins conducting trade in local currencies instead of the dollar, it could undermine the U.S. economy. In the long run, if BRICS were to create its own currency, it would further erode U.S. influence, potentially signaling the decline of America's position as the world's leading economic power. In response to these shifts, former President Donald Trump issued a stark warning to BRICS nations, threatening harsh economic consequences for any country that attempts to create a new currency to rival the US dollar. Trump made it clear in a post on Truth Social that any move by BRICS to reduce reliance on the dollar would not go unchallenged. He stated, "The idea that the BRICS countries are trying to move away from the dollar while we stand by and watch is over," underscoring his commitment to preserving U.S. economic dominance. As we bring you clips from the discussion, please take a little time to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications for more videos like this.
Then on the other side, you've got Iran and China. Russia and China. China has huge investments in Iran and a 25-year development treaty. China gets a lot of its oil from Iran. Russia is about to sign a very large and complex treaty with Iran, which includes defense. Both countries see Iran as pivotal in developing the BRICS, not just the BRICS organization, but the whole of the transport north-south links and east-west. So Iran is very pivotal to BRICS. Now, one of Trump's objectives is to break up BRICS, and he will probably in his negotiations with Russia will say something like, and I'm guessing, "We give you Ukraine. We promise that Ukraine will never join NATO, but in return, you've got to break away your alliance with China." So he goes to China, again I'm guessing, and he says, "You break away from Russia, and if you invade Taiwan, we won't stop you or try to." Washington has already has had some success in weakening Brazil's resolve with BRICS. The big ministries in Brazil are anti-BRICS, so that's put the President Lula on a weak footing. Moreover, so some suggest all Washington has to do is to make a telephone call and Lula is back in jail. So Washington has already started to break the BRICS organization up. And the reason is very simple, that if BRICS was allowed to mature to the extent that they had developed strong secretariats, enlarged the new development bank into a functioning lending institution, and if first they were able to settle most of their trade and investment without using the dollar, which is on the way of them so doing, and then in a few years' time to form their own BRICS currency, then that would leave America as another failed empire. So a primary objective of Washington, whoever is in the White House, is to see that BRICS fails. What does this mean? First of all, BRICS are not going to disappear tomorrow. So eventually, what it will mean is you've got two strong antagonists, and neither is going to step back. So you end in war. So my fear is that the war syndrome, no matter whether in the short term there is ceasefire or deflating the conflict, that on our reckoning, by 2028, we will be at war. That's when World War III starts. The submarine cables, it's not proven that it was they that actually did cut them. I have no information on that at all. What is clear is that for the last 10 odd years, quietly, China has been preparing for global conflict, rebuilding the PLA. In the last couple of years, several private sector factories have had to allocate floor space for the production of PLA goods. Just in the last week or so, Taiwan is saying, we have never seen such a large fleet of naval vessels surrounding us since 1996. I have no idea if there will be an invasion of Taiwan, but it may well be part of the build-up of China's resistance to Trump's introduction of tariffs. You do this, we're going to do that. India's playing its foreign policy the way it has always played it, right back to it ever since independence. But I sense that the strength of India's relationship with Russia, particularly Modi to Putin, and then Modi to Xi, that India is quietly putting more of its eggs into the BRICS camp. Now, this is something that America is going to do its best to stop. I'm told that something is building up in Bangladesh that's going to cause Modi big problems. I don't know what it is, but I've been alerted, just watch out for Bangladesh. So again, America is going to use its toolbox to try to break Modi away from BRICS. So it's part of what one might call a dying empire, using what assets it has left to retain its hegemony. The BRICS countries will use 25 to consolidate, start building up their own secretariats, instead of the new development bank, which is the BRICS bank, which have been making their loans in dollars, start making them in local currencies. So really, it's a time to consolidate, build up our own internal infrastructures, not a time to expand.
So no new members joining is
No.
more.
I don't think so, no. Trump wants a ceasefire. I think by the time we get by the end of January, Russia will have good control over Ukraine. This morning, they launched a massive attack on Kiev, focusing on the command and control bunkers, in which there were also probably NATO officers. The early indications I've only just seen on RT News is they were completely demolished. They have demolished more than 2/3 of Ukraine's power distribution and generating capacity. So it's going to be a very cold winter. Putin has said that at his Q&A session yesterday that he wants peace, but peace on his terms. And I think this is going to be a big sticking point, because his biggest fear is the security of Russia. And that will be the real difficult issues in negotiating with Washington. Because in a couple of years' time, America will have gained hypersonic technology or the equivalent, and therefore drawing a boundary along the Dnieper River is not going to give Russia's radar systems enough warning. He needs control over the whole of Ukraine so that he has enough warning of any impending missile attack by the West. Moreover, no matter who is in the White House, he is completely distrustful of any piece of paper that is written by NATO/Washington. He does not want any NATO troops patrolling Ukraine. So my conclusion is, yes, we get a quick ceasefire, but the negotiations over Ukraine are going to be very protracted. And it's not just going to be Ukraine itself. As Putin says, it's Ukraine's position in Eurasia. So he's looking at a much bigger picture than Ukraine itself. I think there's something else one needs to think of carefully, and that is that the powers behind the throne in Washington are desperate to see that their decades-long objectives of dismembering Russia to gain control of its natural resources can be thrown asunder by Trump. So they are going to do anything they can to see that by the time Trump gets into the White House, he has a big war on his hands. So I throw that out because it's not going to be an easy way from one government to another government in relation to foreign policy.
In the past few years, the U.S. economy has kept growing despite predictions of a slowdown, and 2024 was no different. Despite challenges such as a presidential election, high interest rates, and a cooling labor market, the economy has remained strong. According to the IMF, the U.S. is set to be the top performer among G7 countries. However, inflation has slowly decreased, leading the Federal Reserve to keep interest rates high for longer. The housing and manufacturing sectors have been struggling, and consumers face rising delinquency rates due to debt. Simon predicts that the first half of 2025 may be challenging, with inflation rising and a weakened global economy. However, a key strategy of the Trump administration appears to be a deliberate effort to reduce excessive spending to create a more sustainable economic foundation for future growth. Despite the initial hardships, the second half of 2025 could see a recovery as the economy adjusts to these necessary corrections. That recovery, however, will come with rising inflation, potentially mirroring the 1970s and early 1980s inflationary period. During this time, long-term bonds, such as 10-year treasuries, could see yields exceed 10%, placing significant strain on a highly leveraged debt system and potentially leading to rolling recessions or a deeper economic depression.
There's probably going to be a deliberate policy by the Trump government to take a lot of the fat out of the economy in order to have a sounder base from which they can grow the economy and grow prosperity. For instance, Elon Musk on the 29th of October said, "We have to reduce spending to live within our means, and that necessarily involves some temporary hardship, but will ensure long-term prosperity." So we've got to have a solid base before we can produce the better things for everybody. So on our cycle work, we will see a weak global economy in the first 6 to 9 months of next year, by when the fiscal and monetary stimuli, which Trump and others will introduce, will start a 2-year boom in equities, in business activity, and in commodity markets. The problem is that it will be accompanied by rising inflation. And what we see as we go through 2027 and into 2028, we will see a repeat of the inflation process that we experienced in the late 1970s and early 1980s. And what does that imply? If US CPI is around 13% and global inflation around 15%, what are long-term bonds going to yield? US 10-year treasuries will be yielding over 10%. What is that going to do to a highly leveraged debt system? It's going to be the end of this particular cycle, and we go into rolling recessions or even depression. How does the frictions or the wars being seen in Europe and the Middle East, how do they fit into the scenario? It's very possible that the Trump administration, who don't want wars, will do what they can to prevent the wars from escalating.
What did you mean by? I just want to follow up on that and get some clarity on that. What did you see in the market? What changed?
What changed was the hawkish tone that Powell introduced in his Q&A session. And it started, the markets have been overbought, overvalued. It only needed a small trigger, and that was the trigger. And I think this is what will come from that trigger will be over the 6 to 9 months, so not day to day, but over the next 6 to 9 months, you'll see, for instance, the S&P falling by about 20%, the FANGs by about 40%, and that then lays the foundations for the next big move up, which will take us into 2027, and then we see the collapse. what we have seen has only been the low-hanging fruit that have gone into failures or bankruptcies. For the bigger fruit, it takes longer for them to fail because they have other options, other funding options. It's only when those funding options are exhausted do they fail. And it's maybe that's what he's seeing in the undergrowth of the financial system. I think he's become more realistic. There is a new administration coming in with a new guy. He's expressed a lot of measures he's going to introduce. And tariffs, what do tariffs do? Tariffs do two things. They're inflationary. And at the same time, because they're inflationary, they take money away out of the pockets of the average household. So it's a very confusing picture. Hence why I quoted Elon Musk, who obviously has a big influence on policy, why I quoted him, because they understand we can only grow prosperity by taking a lot of the silly stuff out of the system first. So that's why first half next year, first 9 months next year are going to be tough. Markets falling, economic weakness. Europe is not in a good place. Japan is hardly in a good place. China is actually in a better place, but their recovery won't start until the second half of the year.
Given the obstacles, the idea of a dominant BRICS coalition that can effectively counter Western influence remains largely aspirational. The real appeal for prospective members lies in the opportunity to strengthen their collective voice within global governance. This would help promote a more multipolar world and reduce Western dominance, offering countries a platform to assert their interests more effectively on the global stage. Therefore, what the West must understand about the expanding BRICS bloc is that it is essential to address the underlying motivations driving these nations to align with this group. The West needs to reassess its approach to the global South, understanding that BRICS represents more than just an effort for multipolarity. It highlights the shortcomings and challenges of the existing international system. As such, the West must consider these factors in order to better engage with and address the concerns of these emerging economies. Please share your thoughts on Simon's analysis in the comments below. Also, ensure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications for more videos like this. Thanks for watching.